right, folks, welcome back to part 2 of Fyne Conference here, sessions 3 and 4. Oh my goodness, my audio is on here. Okay. Andy did such a good job presenting earlier and covering what Fyne was and giving a good introduction. I am Stephen Houston. I am a software developer. I've been doing Linux development for, especially in the desktop market, for like 15 years, a little more. Andy and I have worked together quite a bit over those years, most of that time. And when Andy decided to start Fyne and chose to use Go, he came to me and he said, well, Stephen, why don't you come work on this project with me? And I said, well, I don't know Go, and I don't know. And Andy said, no, it's cool. He said, I wrote a book. All you got to do is go read the book, and you'll be able to contribute to the project. So I did, learned Go, learned Fyne really quick, and started contributing. And so one of the things that really piqued my interest was Andy's imagining of what a desktop using Fyne would be on Linux, and so we decided to make that happen. And with that being said, we will now talk about Fyne Desktop. As I said, I'm Stephen Houston, software developer and analyst, 15 years of experience in Linux and desktop open source development. Got some links there to my website, Twitter, and GitHub. So, let's talk about what FineDesk is. FineDesk is an implementation of the window manager piece of the Linux desktop, and it's written in Go. For those of you that may not be familiar with Linux desktops beyond, just some names you've heard like GNOME or KDE or things like that, that's the piece that FineDesk is, and that's the piece that we're doing with FineDesk. So we handle window management and more, which makes it a desktop environment, and we'll get to that later as to what that is that makes it more than window management. You can see a cool little screenshot here of FineDesk in action and what it looks like. For those of you who are really familiar with Linux and Linux desktops, you may be asking yourself, oh man, yet another Linux desktop. I think Andy said in his presentation something very similar about another UI toolkit. But we have our reasonings for it, and Go has a really big presence in web frameworks and services and that sort of thing. But I think it goes unnoticed that Go is a really good language for desktop UI development, and that makes it appealing for Fyne, and that makes it appealing for Fyne Desktop. And there is no full-featured Linux desktop environment that exists written completely in Go. Now, there's been some window managers here and there, but what we're going for is that full-featured Linux desktop environment written in Go, and we have goals with it in our reimagining of it that really, I think, fill a void where Linux desktops, for the most part, are not, they don't have consistency in their aesthetics, or they have an inconsistent design across applications or parts and pieces. So that's kind of where we are and what we're going for with reimagining the desktop. So as I said, with those things in mind, FineDesk was born. It is a native Go desktop. It does follow material design, much like the Fyne toolkit does. In fact, it uses the Fyne toolkit. It has a unique interface. It doesn't really look like any other desktops across Linux or Windows or Mac. and it is specification compliant, and we'll get to that, so that it works with all of your Linux applications, and the specifications they follow. FineDesk can handle it. One of the cool things about FineDesk is that it has a cohesive look and feel with the Fyne UI applications. Going forward, that will provide a ecosystem for Fyne apps to exist that's really cohesive and looks good. As I mentioned, we do follow specifications. We follow material design. We follow the Inter-Client Communication Conventions Manual. We'll get into what clients are a little later, but it's basically a specification that tells you how to communicate with windows that are open, applications that are open. The Extended Window Manager Hint specification is much along the same lines. It just extends the Inter-Client Communication Conventions Manual. We do also follow the free desktop icon theme specification, so that most icon themes work, and the way applications work across Linux and other desktops and toolkits, which are used to seeing how they work, the icons they show, that kind of thing, will work on FineDesk as well. So let's talk about the structure of FineDesk. It is made up of 6 packages, and those packages are the desktop, internal, main, settings, theme, and WM packages. It uses the Fyne toolkit for rendering. Really nice. We don't have to have drawing or rendering code actually within the FineDesk application itself, because we use Fyne, which is an OpenGL backend. We also use the Fyne toolkit for internal applications such as settings, dialogues, and widgets within FineDesk, so that it does have that cohesive look and feel that we're talking about. We do use the software canvas rather than OpenGL to draw window borders and decorations. This saves resources. OpenGL stacks are quite large, and there isn't much graphics or animations that go into window borders and decorations. They're easy to draw and not hard on software. So we use the XGO bindings to communicate with Xorg. This is how we manage to communicate with applications in Windows, and receive input from them as well. So now we'll go through the packages, and I'll give you a brief overview of what each is, especially for those of you that might be interested in helping contribute. I think this is a good overview of where you can start looking. The desktop package is your main pieces of the look and feel of the desktop. It's your desktop background, it's your application bar and taskbar, the widget panel, which consists of a clock and a battery meter, brightness, buttons, systems actions, that kind of thing, and the application launcher, which allows you to start typing the name of an application you wish to open, and it'll autocomplete it and show you matches and allow you to open it. We'll get into all of those features a little later. The internal package is where we have our icon and application lookup handling. Currently it supports Linux and Mac OS icons and application lookups. And it does provide other packages with the available application names, paths to executables, and paths to application icons. The main package, of course, is going to have your binaries, but it also determines what icon provider to use based on your platform. It sets up the window manager on Linux. On Mac OS, it would set up the embedded desktop, which doesn't actually manage Windows, but it does give you the desktop of FineDesk so that you can debug from Mac or run it from Mac and develop with it and look at it and get a good feel for it. It won't actually allow you to do anything with any windows or open them or manage them, but As far as the desktop look and feel goes, you'll be able to use that. And it sets up the root desktop or root window on Linux, and this is your main parent for all windows that exist within the desktop. The settings package creates the settings dialog. It manages saving user preferences. It allows you to change the desktop background. It allows you to, potentially change the icon theme or quick launch icons. And it will allow you to configure your monitors and screens for multi-screen displays using XRE. The theme package manages theme components that are specific to FineDesk. So the decoration icons, which are your close, maximize, minimize icons, the default theme provided background, the default look of the cursor, and then the colors of the panels that exist within FineDesk are all controlled from the theme package. The WM package, WM meaning Window Manager. This is where all the magic happens. It manages clients, which are your application windows, and it handles drawing borders and window decorations around those clients. It will communicate with the display server and clients and windows. So in that sense, everything, all of your interaction that's actually happening on the desktop pretty much happens in the WM package. Focusing windows, stacking windows, moving windows, resizing them, actions like minimizing, also known as iconification, maximizing, full screen. Any of this stuff is going to be handled in the WM package. So whereas the other packages might provide, your aesthetic look and feel, your fun pieces, your application launchers, your clock, that kind of thing, the WM package is what's working behind the scenes to actually make any applications and windows that you open work. So we've got some diagrams here that we'll go through. How the window manager works here. We have clients, which are, application windows, Chrome, anything like that. You open Firefox, that's a client. That's an application window. And a client communicates to the display server, which in our case is XORG. XORG will then communicate to the window manager, which is FineDesk. And it's two-way communication between all of that. So the way this might look, as an example, Chrome opens, it sends some messages through to the display server, says, hey, I'm here, I'm open, this is my window, this is, the size it needs to be, this is the state it's in, whether it's minimized, whether it's normal, and I'm ready to be drawn and put on the screen. The display server will then send that information through to the window manager to FineDesk. FineDesk and the window manager, we'll get to it on the next slide, will do everything it needs to do to set up the window and to be handled. Any changes that Fyne wishes to make to the client, the window manager will send a message back to the display server, which then relays that back to the client application window, back to Chrome. So that's kind of the two-way communication and how that works and really what's going on in the WM package. And within the WM package, we have a few pieces that are separate. We have the client, which are your application windows. We have the frame, which will be your border and your decorations. And then we have properties. Maximized, full screen, borderless, etc. So On the previous slide, when you saw that the X server would send the window manager a message and say, hey, this client's here, it's ready to go. What we do is we create a client within our code, and we apply a frame to it based on any hints that are sent through to us from the server. So we put a border and we decorate it, and then we set it up to be able to communicate back and forth with the client about anytime that border and decoration is resized, anytime that it's moved, that kind of thing. The client can also query and get responses back on properties of the windows, such as its state, minimized, maximized, full screen, that kind of thing. And then it can go back and adjust the frame as need be. So this is kind of how the window manager piece of that puzzle is working. And, you know, if this is clear as mud, I understand. It took me a little while, all these years, to kind of get used to how it all works with the client server model that is Linux window management. But the specifications and documentation are very good. If this is something you're interested in and you want to jump in on, I'll be there to help you every step of the way. You can read the specifications, you can find documentation, you'll start understanding it very quickly. So, down to the parts that everybody was probably excited and waiting for. Let's talk about some of the features that FineDesk has now. It's a sleek, simple window design. You can see in this screenshot here, we have the Fyne Demo app, which Andy previewed and showed in his presentation earlier. And you can see that the borders and the title bar and close and maximize and minimize buttons really have a cohesive look and feel with the Fyne application. Looks really good together. They match. It's excellent. Just a really good feel. The panel that FineDesk has will put all of your information in one place. It's a clean panel. You got your clock, your date, application launcher, battery meter, brightness meter, and a user system action menu. As we go forward, and we'll talk a little more about this later, but as we go forward, any kind of widgets or gadgets or nice little additions, this would be a great place for them to go. Excuse me. The application bar that we have actually is a good story. Andy and I worked on a project 15, 20 years ago, something like that, where we made an application bar, and it was called Engage, and we loved it, and everybody loved it, and it kind of went away and didn't see the light of day for a long time. And so when Andy and I started working on the desktop project, we said, we should bring back that design and code. So that's kind of what we did with the application bar, and it has quick launch icons and a taskbar for running applications. This is where you will get your standard idea of what windows you have open. You can also open applications via the application launcher. So if the icons or apps are not in your app bar, we do provide an application launcher. It's pretty cool. It populates as you type, auto-completing what you're typing and showing you choices that match. And it matches on more than just the name of the application. It matches on descriptions. It matches on exec paths, that kind of thing. If there's any part of the application that matches what you're typing, it will populate here. And you can then click to open those applications. So really neat feature. So that brings us to FineDesk 1.0. It is currently in alpha, and our goals for it really are to be a stable and usable Linux desktop. Not necessarily the most feature-filled for this first release, but one that can be used as a daily driver without issue on Linux. And we are very close. Our alpha's there. You can test it, submit feature requests, bug tickets, any of that kind of stuff is needed. The more eyes, the better. The more hands-on, the better. And once we get through that testing phase and through the alpha, we'll have a release coming soon. And that'll be FineDesk 1.0, and likely will coincide with Fyne 1.2. So, what is the future of FineDesk? We've got some big ticket items that we're going to start addressing once we have our stable and usable desktop out, and it's going to focus on creating a feature-full desktop environment from that point forward. And there are some things that are going to be very exciting coming. We are going to add multi-screen support and configuration. Currently, FineDesk only supports one screen. Now, you can configure two screens using XR and FineDesk will just draw its entire desktop across both screens. So it works in that way right now, but that's not necessarily ideal, especially when it's trying to calculate the middle of the screen, and the middle of the screen is between two monitors or that kind of thing. So in the future, we will support multi-screen by treating each screen separately. This is standard across most desktops and operating systems. So that will be a very nice change. Me personally, I use FineDesk as my daily driver every day on my laptop, and it works great. I'm ready to use it on my desktop, but I really need that multi-screen support, so I'm highly motivated for that one. Virtual desktops and a pager. So one thing that's common across Linux desktops and available on other desktops, but really most common in Linux desktops that you see is virtual desktops. These are, I don't know how to describe it other than they are each a desktop that exist, not physically, but within the software, and you can configure windows and where they go on each virtual desktop. You can move them around. You can change virtual desktops to show you which one is available on your screen. This is really good for multitasking, people that have a lot of windows and applications open. I personally use them a lot. I'll keep some terminals on one virtual desktop. I'll have Chrome with my important tabs on another one. I'll have Goland or VS Code open on another, and that way I can seamlessly just switch virtual desktops to quickly get to where I need to go or what applications I want to see without my desktop being cluttered or stacked, in a really ugly way. So it's just a way to be clean. And a pager is basically the the representation of the virtual desktops. So it allows you to switch virtual desktops. It shows you what windows are on each virtual desktop. It basically looks like a little gadget with squares for each desktop, showing you what's on there and allowing you to switch between them. So virtual desktops and pagers are coming. Those virtual desktops will be configurable, and that's going to be very cool as well and really help productivity and multitasking. So, a full window switcher. As of right now, Alt-Tab will switch windows. It'll switch your focus between windows and raise to the top the next window in the stack. This is cool. I mean, it works, and a lot of people like to do it that way. Some people prefer to have a full representation of all the windows that are open right in front of them, like an expose or something, and be able to choose which window they want to go to that way. That is something that we are looking at adding and adding soon, and that will be another really cool piece to help productivity within FineDesk. Extensibility via widgets. In this sense, widgets really, I would say, cover two terms here. Widget or gadget kind of being the meaning here. When you think of gadgets, you think of you can stick a Post-it note on your desktop, or you can, put a monitor that shows how much memory you're using, or how much CPU, or, control for networking, or control for audio, all of these little widgets, gadget things. But the cool thing about this is, with Fyne and the way it's structured and works, we also mean Fyne widgets. You can create a Fyne widget, and it will easily be able to be placed on the desktop, in the desktop panel, perhaps the application bar. So the sky's really the limit there on what we can do with that extensibility, and where and how we can put widgets within FineDesk, which is always cool. I love toys. I love being able to put widgets and gadgets here and there. I love to change it up often, move it around, take some away, add some. I like to play with my desktop that way. So something I'm really looking forward to in the future when we support that. So some additional features that we're going to add in the near future would be a screen lock. So you can lock your screen and then unlock it with a password. Additional configuration tools will look at allowing you to configure, key bindings and mice bindings, and configure more of the application bar, or icon themes, look and feel, that kind of thing. And we'll add support for desktop notifications. So, you get those little pop-ups that show up on your desktop and says, you have 100 software updates you need to install, or something like that. We're going to add support for those desktop notifications so that they can be seen within FineDesk. So, further in the future, after all those features are done and we're feeling really good about how many features FineDesk has, and feeling really good about its stability and usability, well, then we'll look at doing some big ticket things. Compositing. What compositing does is it renders windows off screen in a buffer, and then allows you to take that buffer and create an image out of it, and then render that image back to the screen. So in doing that, it allows you to have some really neat features, especially aesthetically. You can do 2D and 3D effects within the buffer, and then render those effects back to the screen. Transparency is another one that it allows you to do. You can add shadows to windows. So really, compositing being the next big step forward in really getting a good solid look and feel, and really extending what we can do there. Wayland, we'll get this question a lot. Yes, it's on our radar. When it's going to happen, I don't know. How it's going to happen, I don't know. We may do it when we decide to do compositing. We may just implement Wayland and compositing at the same time. But hey, look, we are always open to ideas, feature requests. We'd love to talk to you. We'd love to see what you think we need to do next. You can go to the FineDesk Git that you see at the link there and submit any tickets or bugs that you see or features that you would like us to address, and we will certainly look at that. You can also find us in the Gopher Slack, which our website, Fyne.io, has an invite link to. And you can just come into the Fyne desktop chat and talk with us, and we'll be happy to help you get started or listen to anything any feedback, criticism, anything you have. We'd be glad to hear it and talk through it with you. So that brings us to the moment that I'm sure everybody's been waiting for, and that is a demo of FineDesk. Alright, here I am back for just a second. Let's pull it up here. Nope. Sorry guys, it is taking me a sec here. I'm having to open it in Zephyr because I don't want to lose my presentation. I want to keep it there, so give me just a sec. Alright, so here we are. This is FineDesk running in Zephyr. This is what it looks like. We covered a lot of these pieces. The desktop background is an interesting story. That is actually Fyne. Fyne is in Scotland, where Andy is based out of. It is coincidental. After the fact of Fyne being created, we actually found out that there was Fyne in Scotland. So we found this really good picture of Fyne and thought that it was fitting for the desktop background. So a lot of the pieces you see here are the ones that we discussed in the presentation. On the right here, you've got the panel with the clock and date, the application launcher, your battery and brightness meters, and your user system and settings menu. Down here is the application quick launch and taskbar we talked about. So it's pretty neat. The application launcher looks like so. So let's start typing an application and watch as it populates what we're looking for. Once you find the app you're looking for, you click it, and here you go. You have an open application. We can see down here in the taskbar that application is running. So let's open Fyne Demo here. Okay. So we have Fyne Demo open, and we now have two windows open. So let's talk about focus for a minute. In FineDesk, you switch which window is being focused by clicking. So as you can see, I click between these two windows. I can also switch that focus down here in the taskbar, so I can do it this way. So a lot of ways that you can do it. You can change the focus by Alt Tab, like we discussed. So you can see we've got a really good look and feel here with the Fyne Demo app. And the taskbar and application launcher. Let's see, we can launch an application here. We'll launch Chromium. Oh, there we are with Fyne's website. So it actually launched in maximize mode, so we just unmaximized it. We can maximize it again so you can see that effect and see that that works. So you can also minimize or iconify your applications. So if I hit minimize here, it's hidden, and we can see down here in the taskbar, there it is. If I click it again, it's restored. You can also do that minimization by just clicking the icon in the taskbar if the window is focused, like so. We do support applications that want to use their own title bars or decorations. Chrome being one of those, you can see that when we select to use not the system title bar and borders, we now get Chrome with its default on theme, and it works much the same. You can move it around and resize it and minimize it. Everything you could do with using the system title bar and borders, and we can also hot swap and switch back to our own decoration and borders. So pretty neat feature. A lot of Linux applications will want to use their own title bar and border. So rather than overriding that like some desktops would do, or not allowing it, as I said earlier in the presentation, we are fully specification compliant. So if clients, Windows send us messages that say they want to do that, we allow it. So you can close an application there, as you can see, and Andy showed some goodies, I think. I'll go back through them a little bit so you can kind of see. We do have solitaire and very nice cohesive feel. You can sit here and play solitaire, and looks like I'm having better luck than Andy had in his presentation. Hadn't even had to go to the deck yet. Text editor, same sort of thing, and we can resize the windows within FineDesk, of course, all of your typical normal window functionality. We do support the custom widget windows, of course. Basically, if it's an application, FineDesk will handle it. And just for my purposes, I'll run FinePhoto because it's my Fyne application. It is nowhere near complete, but it is a cool image thumbnailer and viewer. So let's see, we get to a folder here that has images in it. We thumbnail it. We show them. This all happens concurrently. I think Steve mentioned in his presentation, it's one of the cool things about Go is just how easy it is to write applications like that, that can do things concurrently with these and not in the main loop. So there will be more to come from FinePhoto. It is a work in progress, but another cool Fyne app. So this is FineDesk, and we are getting ready for release, and it is nice and stable and a very aesthetically pleasing desktop that we're proud of and we enjoy using. I'll close out of that. So let me look here and see if we've had any questions. Let's see. Not seeing any questions. Let's see if I can give you a little example of what some of the Fyne desktop code might look like. This is the client code, and you can see that it is very clean. It basically just handles your properties with ease, or your actions with ease, I should say. You can see iconify client, that's minimizing, uniconify is restoring, unfull screen, full screen. You can see with the ease that we do this. The main package that handles messaging is pretty neat. So these are the allowed actions and the supported hints that we have. Let's see, I just got a question. It is slow because I'm doing a ton on this desktop right now, and it was running in Zephyr. So if you actually pulled it up and used FineDesk, as your desktop and not embedded in Zephyr, you would see absolutely no performance issues there, or no slowness. But thank you for the question, Jersey. Let's see. Anyway, yeah, these are the allowed actions and supported hints. These hints and actions will come into the window manager via client messages. So you can kind of see here in a switch statement how we're receiving the messages and then dispatching them to their to their destination, which is usually in the client. So you can see here from the window manager code, we may get a change in state for a window, and we're told that we want to make a window iconic, which is minimized, and that calls the client code that iconifies the client, and the client then updates its stored properties to say that it is now hidden. So everything is very message driven, very much protocol driven in how it works, and there is a flow to it that is really intuitive. So if any of you guys want to contribute, jump in. Be happy to help you and show you the ropes. And I think that I am about out of time here, so let me check one more place. Okay. Engage. Yeah. So I think that's it, and thanks for listening to my presentation on FineDesk, guys, and I hope you found it interesting. Even if you're not a Linux user and you're using Fyne on other platforms, hopefully you found this interesting, and it was cool for you to see that there is a place where your applications that you write can fit into a aesthetic and cohesive, coordinated environment and look really good. So we're proud of FineDesk, and we're really excited about where it is, and we're even more excited about where it's going. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much, Stephen. That was really awesome, very interesting, and that project just looks really, really great. I think we've got just a couple of minutes. I don't want to start the last presentation early, just in case we've got any stragglers. So we'll hang here for a couple of minutes. If anybody wants to post questions in the meantime, that is great. Otherwise, we'll continue in 4 minutes with the last presentation, the 1.2 release and roadmap. welcome back, everybody. Thanks so much, Stephen. That was an excellent presentation, and thanks to Steve earlier as well. It's been really interesting to see other people presenting about this project. I hope that those of you who are viewing have been finding it an educational and inspirational afternoon. I get the exciting spot of wrapping up, and we have a while put aside to talking about the 1.2 release and roadmap going forward. Obviously, we've talked a lot about what the toolkit has to offer, what's recently been added, and what you can do with it, but perhaps we're a little bit unspecific as to when exactly some of those things got added or which release you would need to be using. So let's kick off with really defining the 1.2 release, which has been the focus of most of this presentation for the mobile, the added functionality, widget extension, and as Stephen pointed out in the last presentation, probably underpinning the next version of the desktop project as well. So the 1.2 release is not out now. We haven't been able to pull it together to share with you today, but it is imminent. The expectation is that we'll have it published in your hand by Monday. We're pulling together the last little bit of functionality, bug fixing, and thought it would be really great if a few people out there would be able to test it in advance of the public release. So everything that you've seen is actually available though on the develop branch. All of this functionality has been pushed to the main area where we do all of our work, and given that this is an open source project, you're freely able to check out all of that code that isn't actually yet released. The release that we're going to roll in the next couple of days is going to be a preview release. This will allow us to put all of this functionality out for early adopter testing. We'll put a version number against it so that anybody who is using Go modules, for example, will be able to get this functionality easily. And anybody who is on an older version of Go will put instructions about how you can test it as well ahead of the public release. We want lots of people working with this project and testing the latest functionality. The 1.0 release that we had, we got great feedback, and it was really beneficial to get lots of different points of view to roll a fantastic release, and we want to do that again with 1.2, addressing mobile devices with the same code you're using on the desktop is a big conceptual challenge, and we expect all sorts of feedback. We would love to wrap that into the release and to be able to make it something that everybody understands and is excited about. And obviously testing is all important for us. We've got lots of automated testing, validating the features that we've built, but it's extra people testing it from their point of view that is really going to make a big difference for us. So what remains for us to be able to get the 1.2 release? Well, the iOS and Android support is not yet complete. We're absolutely welcoming any contributions who would like to help us get there, but there's not a huge number of big ticket tasks left yet in the milestone. There is currently no virtual keyboard support for the applications that you build to mobile devices, so it's great for games, it's great for data presentation, anything where you'd be using the screen to interact but you don't need to bring up a keyboard. So the entry widgets currently won't show that system keyboard that you'd be used to seeing to get input. That is our very next item to get included, but I don't think it will meet the Monday pre-release. We don't yet have clipboard integration. Now, we're putting it up here as it's something that we know we don't do. It's very important to us that all of the functionality in the Fyne toolkit works across all of the devices that we support. However, I think if large mobile smartphone device manufacturers can ship for a year without clipboard, then maybe that might get permission to be deprioritized if we would like to get the release out sooner. We're really open to the feedback that we get from the community. And I mentioned earlier today that the desktop rendering has had some significant performance improvements, and that's really made a big difference for how great the applications feel to the end user. We want to make sure that the much younger code on our mobile platform gets the same level of care and attention. There are additional bugs that we would like to squash as part of this release. Window handling and the details about what happens when old windows are closed, which do they switch between, applications with multiple windows, clearly got a bit more complicated when we added a target device that really expects only one window to be open at a time. So we're keen that we smooth all of the areas of that so that things go exactly as expected. And again, I'll say we need a lot more testing in this area. The applications that we've shown you today work just great. The demos will compile and run on the mobile devices and can be deployed to your own hardware. All of these things are fantastic, but we wrote these applications ourselves. We know how we expect them to work, and so it is so important that the community, other people who are working with these tools, try it out, give us their feedback, and let us know what we could do to improve it. With all that in mind, like I said, some of these tickets are not part of a long list. It shouldn't really be a huge amount to get this over the line, and we would really be excited to have this in your hands in 2 weeks' time. So we're currently aiming to have all of this released on the 6th of December. We'll need your help, and we definitely would love any support or advice or feedback that will help us get there. This is the aim, and I'm really hoping that we can pull this together between the team and the community to make it happen. Either way, I'm looking forward to playing around building new applications across all my devices over Christmas with the 1.2 release out there and my code deploying to all the devices I can find. So that's where we are with 1.2. I hope that everything that you've seen has been interesting. If you're able to try out the development code, you could do so right now. If you're waiting for the pre-release, it's just a couple of days before that will be in your hands, and we will be pulling all of this together to get a release out in a couple of weeks. Of course, once 1.2 is out, the story certainly doesn't slow down. In fact, it probably just gets more exciting from there. We've put together a lot of infrastructure to be able to build better and applications faster across more devices. So where could we go from here? So let's just have a look at the roadmap after the 1.2 release. We are expecting to pull one more release on the version 1 numbering. This is some pretty cool functionality that we think will finish rounding out the true capabilities of a graphical toolkit such as this. The full two-way data binding is something that is very exciting if you've come from a web background. To have your applications connected to data and to automatically update is something that's become pretty much standard, and other toolkits are managing to see this functionality being brought in. we have an opportunity here with the new tooling. Go as a language is going to make this great. This is something that we can really use to make application development so much easier for anybody who's managing data or keeping state in a way that's not tied to the presentation specifically. I'm going to come back to that a little bit later on. We are going to add a list and table widget at least, which showcase this new functionality. Incredibly, the list widget is joining us a little bit far down the road. It's been requested many times through our bug tracker, but we haven't had the functionality to do it correctly. We didn't think that building it without the data support would produce a really great user experience. There was a chance that application developers would have to do too much work on their end. So we have decided that it's going to be time to add it once 1.3 is underway. It's also well beyond the time where people would like dialogues, especially file, open and save dialogues to be included in their applications. Currently, you open a file in your application by passing it as a command line argument, which is not really ideal for everybody and introduces some challenges when you're working from application launchers and so forth. And lastly, for 1.3, we're really looking to improve our text formatting as well. The layouts, the widgets for labels and entry work very well, but they are of limited functionality if you want to present or work with formatted text. So we're going to scope that into 1.3 and provide Markdown support built in as well. So that will be to provide formatted text inline in your application. We'll be using the Markdown format as opposed to embedded HTML, which is a route that many people have taken before, but we think that Markdown is the way to go, and we'll have the functionality built into the system to support it as part of the 1.3 release. Now, with all of these, there's a lot of work involved, and with large pieces of work requires a lot of planning. In fact, for those who have been paying attention through the project's history, you might have noticed that we were initially hoping to have data binding in version 1.2. However, as we built out mobile and also the new API for widget extension and custom widgets, we realized that was a little bit too much all in one release. And so we've put the data binding back to its own release along with these other features you see here. However, because the work's been ongoing, we do already have working prototypes that show how that can work. So once again, I would like to hand over to Steve and his presentation from a couple of weeks ago at GopherCon Australia. Thanks again for permission to share these videos. And over to Steve to share where we are with data binding.
Two-way data binding in Fyne. How do we do it? There's a data API that's being developed at the moment that we're hoping to release by Christmas. It's basically a set of interfaces defined inside Fyne, where if your data can implement these interfaces, then you get automatic two-way data binding. And I'm using it in a game I'm writing where RPCs are coming in with protobuf information, and I don't want to manipulate them, I just want the data to come in and automatically update all the maps and all the explosions and everything else happening in the game. Very quickly, data item is just any data structure that has a stringer interface and that you can attach listeners to. So every time the underlying data changes, the listeners are automatically fired. A data map, same thing, but where the map itself is modified, new entries added or removed, then the listeners get fired against that. And finally, a data source, which on the surface looks like a slice of data items, but it supports lazy loading, pagination, and just makes it fairly easy. I think it's modelled on the iOS data source. The naming is quite similar. So how does that affect your code? How do we go and implement this inside a program you may have written? Well, initially we've got a number of constructors for all the basic widgets. So if you want to create a label, it's just widget.newLabel, give it a string, new entry, and then you can have callbacks on there to read and write the values. New checkbox with a callback function, all very straightforward. So to take those existing function signatures and make them work with two-way data binding, we just have a variant that we'll be adding that says new entry with data, give it a reference to a data item, and then all of the publish and subscribe, updates, everything else is all happened automatically within the toolkit. Which again, if you've used something like Angular lately, there's a lot of code there that's achieving all that, and there's a lot of weird nomenclature that you have to go through to interface with that. Not with Fyne though, because Go. So let's have a demo of this one. Oh, it's pretty insistent, this, isn't it? It really wants me to come up with. Okay, so here we have an application with a window and a number of data items attached to that. I've just created one of each type here. So there's a data item of type clock, which is just a string that changes itself once a second. Some Boolean data, some numeric data, string data, floating data, blah, blah, blah. So this application here has one window with a view against that. We'll fire up another one here. This is a different view of the same data. So as I change this one here, you'll see on the right-hand side there that some of those, the size in fact is changing each time I change that. This one here, delivery time, you can see the value changing in the larger window on the right as I move that around. So this is just basically a set of widgets that are bound to that same data. And we can sort of prove that by firing up another one and another one. And you'll see that as I change data here, all the global data is all changing in real time and updating all the subscribed widgets attached to that. Nice. Now there's another button. What does this do? Okay. Who put that there? So here's our fractal. If we recall, this one uses a procedural function that, given an x and y coordinate, will return a colour. So all I've done here is take a clone of that and change the algorithm so that it is influenced by the global data from the data store. That's a mouthful as well, but you can see it work here. If I go to this one and change the delivery time, that's going to change the scaling of that fractal in the blue window. So what's happening there is, as this slider is changing, it is publishing a change to the global data, and then all the other windows are receiving a subscription event. And we can have another one. Got to sync that one. So there we go, everything's all changing all at the same time. And I can go to the fractal, I'll just set focus to that and use those keys we used before to change the scaling. That will change it within this fractal and then tell all the other widgets that the underlying data has changed. Nice. One more button. Of course, the game of life. This is a very strange implementation of life in that I've included a number of effects that are going to be affected by these shared data widgets here. So if I change the delivery time, it's affecting the hue. Let's just make that a bit bigger. There we go. So I can change the colour, and it also changes the animation speed. So that's going to go full speed if I go up to there. And put it down the middle. That'll invert the display, and again, using some third-party libraries to, if you recall with this one, it returns a Go image, so I can implement other third-party libraries there to apply filters to that. So let's say go there, it does an outline effect, invert effect, speed it up. Done.
Oh, wow. Thanks so much, Steve. That's a really helpful insight into how data binding could work and probably will work for the 1.3 release. Hopefully folk could see the power that that builds into applications where the data is not directly connected to the widgets and the graphical presentation that you're working with. So that's 1.3, what we plan to be out at some point next year as the last one of the 1 release chain. Version 2, goodness, it scares me a little bit just saying that out loud, but we are already thinking about where we could go after that. And animations and multimedia seem to be the focus of what we should be adding at that point. Believe it or not, with so many great demos that we've seen today, there really isn't much animation built into the Fyne toolkit at the moment, and any transitions that you've seen have been coded within the application. It might not be a lot of code, but we do want it to be more seamless, to be a completely straightforward experience for any developer who's building an application to get smooth animations and transitions just by describing the widget that they want, the type of animation that they wish to apply, or a transition that should occur, and have the toolkit figure everything in between. So we think that's going to be a great addition to a 2.0 headlining item that will make the user interface again just feel a more engaging experience. Then video and audio support. The demonstration earlier where audio was included was patching in a third-party library. There is so much great open source code out there, but we don't really want people to be having to figure out how to make that work. It should be possible just to have the animation and the video drop into your application and run without having to think about anything at all. So those items together should mean that we're able to handle those more complicated aspects of a graphical presentation. Then we're going to look at drag and drop. The applications that have been created so far have managed to work without it through items like tap and place, like in the Solitaire app. Drag and drop would be pretty cool to add there, and it's not a huge amount more, but getting the API right is very difficult when you think it needs to integrate with the operating system, but not just one operating system, but all of them that we need to work through. And if you think about the differences in the way that even desktops implement it, Windows is different to Linux, is different to Mac OS, but then consider how the drag and drop is working on iOS through iPad, and also things like a future potential might be Chromebooks when we're targeting our Android applications further. That's really difficult to do right, and we need to make sure that it's just completely straightforward for people to use. So it's going to take a little while before we're ready to include that functionality. And possibly the coolest for the development environment side of things is that it's about time, we reckon, by then, that we pull together a graphical editor for the user interfaces that you're creating. The playground is a nice addition this release, and it means that we can preview what's being done very, very simply. But what would be more powerful is if it was a drag and drop, what you see is what you get editor affair for creating the application user interfaces for your projects. And so we're going to be looking to include that. It might be plugins to an existing IDE, it might be a standalone application which saves the user interface to a file that is then loaded, or it might be something else. There is a lot of planning still to go into the functionality that we're talking 2 major releases down the road. Should we be adding more? it would be good to get feedback from other folk about what they would like to see coming in sooner, and also where they would like the project to go down the road. 1.2 is pretty much set, we're nearly there, and the 1.3 release, we probably have a lot on our hands. If it relates to text handling and data binding, we should be able to pull it in, but if not, then the 2.0 potential release might be the place for it to be targeting. But let us know what you think, and we'll see what we can pull into the roadmap. And if thinking that far down the road wasn't quite far enough, let's just have a look at what might exist beyond there. Well, when you start to look that far out, it's obviously a little bit difficult to think about specific functionality. So we're talking at a high level what the project is aiming to do. Well, with all of this enabling of great user interfaces that could be built fast, run well, and effectively across so many different devices, we're really going to start looking towards building out applications that make use of that. And so we're hoping to start seeing more comprehensive utilities or productivity applications, a lot more entertainment stuff as well, I think, that we'll be looking forward to seeing. But we would be keen to start showing that the Fyne applications can really contend with other leading software from other sources. And that also leads in to the desktop environment, and following on from the roadmap that Stephen presented in his desktop discussion earlier, we're looking to pull together a complete desktop experience that's fast, attractive, and to do so we'll also need the applications that are expected, from regular desktop utilities beyond a calculator through to the types of productivity software that is really conducive to a complete environment. We don't want to reinvent absolutely everything, but we see there's enough software out there that could really do with a significant improvement in the sorts of areas that this toolkit is really aiming to support. And like I said before, we're absolutely looking for other people to feed into where they think this project should go, what they think it could do for them, and that is you, that's everybody listening here. It's everybody that we have spoken to through the different events that we've been holding and through the chat channels that we go around, just talking to people about what might be the right way forward for them. And we would just love it if more folk would be providing inspiration or thoughts that would better tie up with what they want in an environment for them. We have a very long list of things that we're going to do, and we're excited about it, but it's always better when you know that you're doing what somebody else needs and they are just excited to get it as soon as it's ready. So I hope that has been a helpful look at where the project is going. I know it's been a long day. There's been, I hope, a lot of information. It's been very fun indeed presenting this to you all. I want to say thanks to everybody that has been involved in pulling this event together. Not just the software, the tools, the APIs, and the applications that we've been building that we were showing, but also the material, the technology, all of those things that have made today possible. If you would like to learn more or to get involved, there are a few links here that weren't all present earlier. If you would like to just learn more from a beginner's point of view, or if you're looking to work with the API, we have a tour online at tour.fyne.io, which is a very straightforward introduction to how the Fyne toolkit works, following the model of the Go tour, which you might be familiar with. They did a fantastic job of helping people learn the programming language, and ours simply follows on from there. And the develop documentation that I mentioned before is a great place to go if you want to know more about the architecture, the history of the project and how it works. If you would be interested in contributing, then thank you so much for even thinking about it. It's really excellent each time somebody new joins the project. We're looking for, obviously, software engineers who can help us with the code, adding the functionality, working out where some of the bugs exist. But not just that, we need people who are excellent at testing, who can file issues and help track down those strange little things that we don't notice when we're building day to day, but we want to make sure don't exist by the time that these releases hit the final version. Documentation is critical. If anybody is excited to be working on that, whether it's as a professional documentation writer or somebody who's learning the toolkit and can see why it's difficult to get started, we'd love to hear from you. People come into the project and say, oh, I'm sorry to be asking a beginner's question. Not at all. If you're asking a question, then maybe there's some missing documentation, and we want to make sure that that's available and easy to find. And also designers. It's been fantastic to have contributions that have helped pull together the logo and the look and feel, and indeed the way that shadows and so forth have worked across the buttons, but more in that area would be helpful. It's a case of having other more opinions and contributions from different angles mean that we're making more well-considered decisions when we pick our design aesthetic. Anybody looking to help in those ways can go to our GitHub project. Everything is up there. We track all of the issues and functionality and milestones in that project. You can find information about how to contribute or what type of things we're looking for. Please do go there, check it out. Let us know if you have any questions. And lastly, we're very lucky to have some really committed core contributors to the project. I mentioned that we have over 30 contributors in total, but the project wouldn't be what it is without 3 or 4 core contributors who to some extent are putting almost all of their time into this right now. And due to the new GitHub sponsors program, there is now a really easy way that you can show your thanks for their hard work. I've included 3 of those links at the bottom here. There's myself and Stephen, who did the desktop presentation, is Okra Titan. Toaster is another of our core contributors who unfortunately wasn't able to present to us today, but you will have seen his work throughout the presentations. And Steve O'Connor, who was presenting on data and some of the fun and games projects, is also on the project but doesn't currently have his own sponsor page. However, you can sponsor the project as a whole through the last link on that page, and if you would consider it, that would be really amazing. If you've got questions about it, don't hesitate to ask. If you want to chat further, if you want to ask questions or just have feedback for us, we are available, as mentioned before, on the Gophers server in the Fyne channel. It's linked from the Fyne.io website. You could tweet us, as you've seen various tweets going out today. We are available on @Fyne_io, and the contributors all have their GitHub accounts as well. Get in touch directly or talk through Twitter. There's an email form on the website if that is what you would prefer. The YouTube live chat probably won't survive finishing the presentation today, but there's lots of ways that you can get in touch if you would like. Now, we will be moving on this evening to our last part of the day, which is a Q&A session. The Fyne team, those who are able to make it, are going to be connecting to Google Meeting. If you would like to join that, get involved in the conversation, this is the link. We'll be tweeting it shortly. We are a little ahead of schedule, sorry, and so there is time if anybody would like to go through anything that was missed. We could look at the test capabilities that I mentioned skipping over earlier, or I could do a quick demonstration of how to extend an existing widget. If you could drop into the chat whether either of those would be really helpful, or if you want to see more about the desktop project that Stephen mentioned before. We've got time to do either of those, and we'll just leave that question hanging there for a short while before moving on. And I just see some messages coming up, so let me quickly check where we are. Ah, yes, the web UI version. Something that we have spoken about in this project is that if you're going to be hitting all platforms, then maybe delivering in the web browser is something that should be considered as well. And you are absolutely right, it is part of the work in progress. It's something that actually is working. We have demos of it. It's really cool to see a window inside the browser window. As with each of our new drivers, it doesn't work just beautifully as you would expect it to. The differences between how windows behave and various things like that mean that there's a lot of polishing to be done, and it's been a bit of a challenge with some of the tooling, because it's perhaps not where it needs to be to support all of the functionality that we're looking to be pulling together. So that is ongoing, and we'll be excited to announce when that might get released when we're a little bit closer. There was a presentation that we had potentially to give today to demonstrate it. Unfortunately, Cedric, who is leading that part of the project, was not able to join us because he is traveling to another event which starts tomorrow morning, and so he's currently on a plane and had to prepare his presentations for that event instead. So sorry we weren't able to show you that today. It's definitely in the work, but it's not there right now. In the area of tooling, one other thing that I forgot to mention, and apologies, it skipped my mind earlier, is that the compiling of iOS applications has a little challenge around the fact that Apple is becoming insistent that bitcode is being included in binaries, and if bitcode doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry. What it does mean, unfortunately, is that the Go compiler, which was producing certain flags that were incompatible with bitcode generation, had to be resolved. That has been moved upstream. The maintainer of Geo, another project that uses that provides a graphical user interface in a completely different way, but also through Go, has been maintaining the Go mobile project for quite some time and working in this area. He's been able to put the appropriate fixes in place, but we need that release to go out, and that's the 1.13.5, which is probably due quite soon, but I don't have a release date for you right now. So if you are working with the development version of the Fyne project and looking to compile iOS applications, then you might need to get the cutting edge version of Go, or come and chat with us. We have some workarounds that you could put in place in the meantime. The expectation is that that release will be out before we roll the 1.2 release, and although that will mean it depends on the very latest Go, it seems better to go the right way and produce the bitcode output than to produce binaries that aren't ultimately going to make it through the App Store process. So hopefully that really helps for anybody who's looking at work in progress or working in any of those areas at the moment. Let me just see what's coming in on the Twitter. Okay, I think that we don't have any more questions right now. What I will do is probably wrap up this live stream. Thank you all very much for coming, for being here, spending your Fridays listening to us talk about our passion of the Fyne project. And that Q&A session will open up shortly. In a few minutes, I'm sure that we'll be on there ready to chat a little bit early. And if you have any other questions, please do head over there. We'll look forward to speaking to you then. And have a great rest of the day.